But if you think simply, a culture is a way of life lived in common. And a civilization is a culture that rises high enough, spreads far enough, and lasts long enough to merit the term civilization. And of course, many civilizations have elements of geography and climate. Think of the Nile in Egypt. And institutions such as military. Think of Pharaoh's chariots, or the Roman sword, or the English fleet. But every civilization also has its answer to the basic questions of human existence. And of course, in almost all, that is religious. And yet people today are shying away from talking about it in a serious way. But of course, it is central to what we're talking. People have mentioned this morning Judeo-Christian culture, yes. Judeo-Christian morality, yes. But there's no escaping the challenge of the Jewish and Christian faiths themselves.
For much of this year on the Fuel Project, we've been wrestling with how we approach what Os Guinness calls our civilizational moment. Western civilization is, at its core, Christian civilization. This is the civilization that Christianity built. Tom Holland describes it by saying that if you live in the West, you're like a fish swimming in Christian waters. Christian assumptions and ideas so saturate our environment that we don't even realize how much of what we believe comes directly from the Bible. So that even if you're agnostic or atheist in the West, almost everything that we have held to be good and true and proper and even self-evident for centuries finds its origin in the Christian faith and in the Bible. Christianity is what taught us, for example, that all human life is made in the image of God, and therefore all human life has dignity and value. That was a completely alien concept to the ancient world. Plato, for example, believed that some humans were gold, some were silver, and some were bronze. Some were born to rule, and others were born to be ruled, or even to be enslaved. And of course, this idea persists in many places around the world, even today. For example, in Hindu culture, you still have the caste system, with the very lowest of the low being the Dalits or the untouchables. The idea that all human life has equal dignity and value is a specifically Christian idea, which is why we were the first civilization in history to abolish slavery, the first in history to establish the modern idea of nursing in hospitals, the first to establish charities and free education for all, girls as well as boys, the first to establish schools for the deaf and the blind. The Bible is the root of our legal systems in the West, our customs, our sense of fairness and justice. Christianity is the inspiration for our most enduring and beautiful music in the West, our works of art, our sculpture and architecture. Christianity saturates our words, our literature, our poetry. The Bible exceeds even Shakespeare in its influence on the English language, to the extent that often we use biblical phrases from day to day without even realizing it. Christian assumptions about the nature of God are the reason why the West became the home of science and invention and discovery, and why almost all technological advancements for the past millennia have originated in Western nations. But perhaps the most important thing that Christianity has done for our civilization, it's given its people meaning and purpose and hope. It's given us an answer to the reason why. As Os Guinness said, it's answered the most basic reasons of human existence. And around those shared understandings, we built communities, traditions, holidays, festivals. We developed a sense of belonging, a sense of unity, togetherness, a sense of safety and of peace. If you live in the West, you inherited all of those good things, all of those blessings. And whether you like it or not, or realize it or not, it's all rooted in the Christian faith. For some time now, however, the West has been slowly abandoning Christianity, the source of all of its blessing, and now severed from that root that nourished it and gave it life and that blessed it. The West has now become the proverbial cut flower civilization. As the West has turned away from Jesus towards atheism and secular humanism, it maintained its Christian beauty for a while, so that at first nobody even noticed that anything had changed, and so that at first it emboldened people to think in the vanity of their hearts that maybe we don't need God, after all, we can do without him. But over the decades, the decay and degradation slowly began to become apparent and slowly manifested itself. The West has for some time been slowly dying. I saw this quote recently which says, "It feels as though we are currently living within a society that is in decline, whose decrepit body is a shell of its former self, struggling with every breath, waiting to eventually die a thoroughly undignified death." And this is all happening, I must repeat, because we abandoned God, the source of our blessing. The first signs of the decay were perhaps most obviously seen in the things that we make as a culture, the things that we produce. The Bible says, "A good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart, and an evil person produces evil things from the treasury of an evil heart." What you say flows from what is in your heart. If you want to know the health of a human heart, look at what they say and look at what they produce. Is it beautiful or is it ugly? Is it good or is it evil? When we loved Christianity, we produced music that was objectively beautiful. Think Mozart, Beethoven, and Bach. Music that sought to elevate the mind, soul, and spirit, and that invited listeners to consider the transcendent goodness, beauty, and truth of God. It was music that encouraged us to look up and outward and to consider the highest things. Even if you go back to the dawn of pop music in the 1950s, there was an innocence, a purity, and a sweetness in the lyrics, which simply doesn't exist anymore. Because through the decades, the music has undeniably become increasingly degraded and increasingly dark, ugly, narcissistic, subversive, shocking, devoid of any real wit or inspiration, at best nothing to say at all, and at worst absolutely obsessed with debased sexuality. If what we make is a reflection of what's going on in our hearts, pop culture today often suggests our hearts have grown incredibly sick. You can see the degradation in the art that we value as well. We used to be the Christian civilization that produced Michelangelo, Da Vinci, and Raphael. Art that once again aimed to elevate the mind, soul, and spirit and invited focus on transcendent goodness, beauty, and truth. It encouraged us to look up and outward to consider the highest things. Go into any modern art gallery today, however, and you'll mostly find art that is devoid of any real inspiration by artists with nothing really to say, and that is often deliberately ugly, self-centered, shocking, puerile, narcissistic, dark, and again, obsessively sexualized. Modern art is again evidence of hearts that have grown sick. And of course, the most obvious way in which we've grown sick in the West is in regards to our morality, the things that we say and do that we consider to constitute good and proper behavior. We used to have boundaries of taste and decency in the West. But after decades of trying to push at those boundaries and break them down, and for some reason we thought that would be a good thing, the results have been chaotic and devastating. Sex outside marriage is now normalized. Hundreds of partners is now normalized. Fatherlessness is normalized. Abortions are normalized. Homosexuality and gay marriage, pornography, transgenderism, some are even pushing for paedophilia. As Jeremiah wrote of his generation, are they ashamed of their disgusting actions? Not at all. They don't even know how to blush. We've become so detached from good morality in the West that sometimes we don't even know what good is anymore. Good and evil's become inverted. On the one hand, Christian street preachers, singers, and silent prayers are being persecuted by the police and arrested, yet Islamic rape gangs are being protected by the police. We're becoming a society where black is white and white is black. Now, over recent weeks, we've been considering how the Crusaders once pushed hostile Islamic invaders out of Europe by force to protect the peace and freedom of Christendom. And we've been asking the question, since Muslims are openly making threats and attempts to invade, subjugate, and enslave us again, and they predict that within 20 to 30 years, they'll have enough numbers to enact their wishes, their fantasies to enslave and subjugate us, would we as Christians, under such a circumstance, be entitled to respond in the same way again? That's kind of what we've been asking in recent weeks. However, having gone on that journey, I have to say that I don't think that's how we deal with this civilizational moment. Firstly, because I think it plays into enemy hands. I think people are trying to goad us down that path as a justification for authoritarianism. I think we need to be smart here. I don't think it's the most effective way to respond to the situation. But mostly because our real problem, we have to admit, is not external, it's internal. The problem begins with the fact that we in the West have abandoned the source of our blessings. We've abandoned Jesus and his teaching. And it's primarily for that reason that we're a cut flower civilization in decline. If we don't come back to Jesus, then nothing else works. Everything else is futile. If we do come back to Jesus, everything gets fixed. Even the things that we forgot were broken get fixed. We come back to life again. We need to come back to Jesus first and foremost and start countering and undoing the decades of failed cultural Marxism that has overtaken our society, spread through our schools, our universities, political parties, police force, civil service, deep state, and that has infected the minds of so many. So that today we have a generation that is sick at heart. It's anxious, it's depressed, it's hopeless, it doesn't know right from wrong, it's confused, and it rejects and hates the very God that provided all of our blessing. To the extent that if invaders came in today, I believe that half of our society would probably be supporting them, standing by the side of the road waving jihad flags. So confused and full of self-hatred are they. So we need a revival, is what I'm saying. Over the coming decades, we need millions with all humility and repentance to come back to Jesus. We have to make the world understand that this idea of continuing to enjoy a Christian civilization without actual Christianity is over. It's just not going to happen. If you want what you had back again, you need to return to Jesus. William Wilberforce was someone who faced a similar issue in his day, and he fought to re-establish Christianity and Christian values in the land, and he succeeded. And beforehand he wrote, "I must confess equally boldly that my own solid hopes for the well-being of my country depend not so much on her navies and armies, nor on the wisdom of her rulers, nor on the spirit of her people, as on the persuasion that she still contains many who love and obey the gospel of Christ. I believe that their prayers may yet prevail." It worked for him, and that's where I stand today. Quite simply, we need a revival. We need it. And the good news is, it may be happening. There seems to be a wind blowing right now that I've never known up until this moment. And we'll talk about that in the next video.